We will go ahead and get started. For those of you who are joining us for the first time for one of our Steve Fund Family Support Initiative webinars, welcome. For those of you who've been with us before, welcome back. Really excited to be with you tonight. This is the kickoff for a three-part webinar series that we are doing this fall called about protective factors. And our session tonight is called Resilient Together: Tools to Protect Family Mental Health in Challenging Times. We just had a session last night, the third and final of our Ask the Expert series, where we talked about caring for ourselves as parents and caregivers. So if you were with us last night, welcome back, and actually share in the chat if you don't mind, if you were with us for that or for some of the other Ask the Expert sessions. We'd also love to know where you are joining us from. So for those of you who may not be aware of the Steve Fund, I wanted to share just a little bit of information and then I will introduce myself. The Steve Fund promotes the mental health and emotional well-being of all young people, particularly those from underserved and under-resourced communities, by equipping them, their families, educators, and mental health professionals with the knowledge, skills, and community support needed to achieve their full potential. Our vision is that every young person is fully supported by peers, families, communities, and institutional cultures that value and contribute to their mental health and emotional well-being. For young people from underserved and under-resourced backgrounds, we aim to protect their mental well-being, equip them with practical tools for resilience, and promote their lifelong success. Our goal is to support them in reaching a healthy, productive adulthood, enabling thriving in academic, personal, and career pursuits that benefit their family, community, and society. So again, that is some background on the Steve Fund, and we're so glad to have you with us tonight. Just to introduce myself, my name is Dr. Gina Newsom Duncan. I am a board-certified psychiatrist and psychotherapist in private practice in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am the lead mental health expert with the Steve Fund's Family Support Initiative. I've been with the Steve Fund for a little over 3 years now, and I am excited to be facilitating this session and some of the other activities that we will be doing around protective factors. I'm a graduate of Hampton University and the UNC School of Medicine, did my residency at Harvard. I'm a wife and I'm a mom to two daughters. I have an 18-year-old who just started her freshman year of college a week ago, and a 14-year-old who started her freshman year of high school 2 days ago. So for many of you, may have children in similar ages. Another thing would love to have you share is the ages of your children, just so we can kind of get a sense of who all is here and what stages we may be going through. For those of you who've participated in our programs before, you've heard me say that as both a professional and on a personal level, this area when it comes to supporting mental health and well-being for our young people and for ourselves as parents and caregivers is something that I'm just very passionate about. So really, really glad to have you with us tonight. So I mentioned that this is the start of a campaign that we are doing at the Steve Fund, focusing on protective factors. And the theme of this campaign is protect, nurture, and thrive. We are working to mobilize parents, caregivers, and families to protect their young people's mental health, nurture their well-being, and help them thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. I'm going to be talking more about what that means and the rationale behind this, but certainly in a time such as this where there are so many stressors, we really think that it's important that we equip families and parents and young people with these factors that can help them not just to survive, but to thrive even in the midst of challenging times. So we said protect. In terms of our family calls to action, protect means protecting the mental health of our young people by recognizing warning signs, creating a safe and supportive environment, and strengthening their agency and resilience. We're going to talk about nurturing the emotional well-being of your family by leading with honesty, modeling positive mental health habits, and helping your young people feel seen, valued, and secure. And then thriving. So we want to thrive as a family by connecting to mental health resources together, honoring our cultural values, and creating positive changes in our community. One of the reasons that we think this is so important, and that reaching out to parents and caregivers in particular is important, is that research that we've done at the Steve Fund shows that families and parents are one of the most important, if not the most important, sources of support for young people when it comes to their mental health and well-being. But we aren't able to fully support our young people if we as parents and caregivers aren't healthy ourselves when it comes to our own emotional and mental well-being. So when we talk about nurturing, leading with honesty, and modeling positive mental health habits, these are things that a lot of us may not have had the opportunity to learn. We hadn't been taught or had modeled for us, but that doesn't mean that it's too late to learn those things. And so that's part of what we are striving to do here. So we have some objectives for tonight. The first is that we're going to discuss some key components of resilience, including self-esteem, coping skills, and personal agency. We're going to talk about practical strategies that we can use to nurture emotional strength, mental well-being, and a sense of empowerment in our young people. And then talk about how we can engage in open conversations between ourselves and our young people that build trust, confidence, and resilience at home. All right. In terms of our roadmap for today, we've done our introductions. We're going to talk about protective factors. If that's a term that you're not familiar with, that's okay, because we're gonna talk about that. And then we're going to lean in to talk about individual strengths as protective factors, and specifically self-esteem, coping skills, and self-efficacy. Then we're going to talk about strategies and activities that we can use and encourage our children to use that enhance their resilience. And then we're going to open up for some Q&A at the end. And just to let you all know, we are recording this session. This is going to be available on our website at a later time. You can access it again, share it with friends and family. The Q&A portion is not going to be recorded, though. We think it's important to create a safe space. If you want to come off mute, if you're on camera, we welcome that. But we will not be recording that portion of the session. In terms of a few community values, I've already mentioned, if you want to be on camera, you are welcome to. It's great to see faces. If you could just stay on mute until we get to the portion, the Q&A portion. And then if you have a question, you could just use the raise your hand function and come off of mute if you'd like to ask your question, or you're welcome to share your question in the chat. Excuse me one moment. We want this to be as engaging as possible. So I'm going to be asking questions and looking for feedback. So please share questions and comments in the chat as we go along. And then also, this is something I will say frequently, recognize that there is a certain level of expertise that I am sharing tonight, but all of us as parents and caregivers, all of you have areas of expertise, things that you've learned. If there's something that you've learned within your family or your experience that you would think would be helpful for others to know, please share that. This is a community of growth, and we all benefit from that shared knowledge. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started here, talking about protective factors. And I want to start with this quote by renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Carl Bell, who I had the privilege of meeting. Dr. Bell said, "Risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors." So I'll say that one more time. Risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors, right? We all know, I think, what risk factors are, right? We typically think about them when it comes to physical health, for example. We know that smoking is a risk factor for developing lung cancer, emphysema. There are certain risk factors that predispose people to diabetes or heart hypertension and other adverse physical health outcomes. We're talking, for the purpose of this campaign and this series, about risk factors and protective factors as they relate to our mental health and well-being, and specifically those of our young people. So risk factors are attributes, characteristics, or exposures that increase the risk of developing an adverse mental health outcome. And some examples of that are experiencing neglect as a child, experiencing discrimination or racism due to minority status in society, exposure to trauma, the loss of a caregiver or family member, Having a caregiver who has poor mental health is a risk factor. And abuse within the family, not just receiving or experiencing, being abused physically, but witnessing abuse within the family, community level violence. This is not an exhaustive list, but we all know, I think, that these are some of the experiences that if someone experiences these things during childhood, it can predispose them to having negative outcomes as adults, maybe having an anxiety disorder, depression, substance use disorder, PTSD. However, as Dr. Carl Bell said, risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. So that means that although someone may be exposed to a risk factor, it doesn't mean that they are guaranteed to end up with that negative outcome. And that's because of these things that we call, or factors we call protective factors. These are attributes, characteristics, or exposures that reduce risk factors or independently act to increase positive outcomes. So you could think of protective factors as kind of in some ways maybe neutralizing some of the risk factors. If a child, let's say, experiences bullying from a student at school, but they have really strong connections to other friends and to teachers and parents who help to build up their self-esteem, that may not undo that situation of bullying, but it can certainly help to offset or even help them thrive in the face of that new risk factor that they experienced with the bullying situation. So there are a lot of examples of protective factors, coping skills, healthy coping skills, individual agency, having access to care and support services, secure attachment. This means feeling bonded securely to your parents and caregivers, being able to trust and to know that they love you and that they've got your back and that you are supported and they're going to be there for you. We're going to talk more about secure attachment in the second session that we have coming in September, on September 17th. Caregiver positive mental health is another protective factor. And cultural practices. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but I wanted to give some examples and to point out that protective factors exist in several domains. And the ones that we're going to be primarily focusing on during this series are the individual domain, the relational, and the communal. And for the purposes of tonight, we're going to really be talking about the individual domain of protective factors. If at any point I'm going too fast, if you need me to go back to a previous slide or you have questions, don't hesitate to let me know and put the questions in the chat. So what I wanted to talk about now, after we've kind of introduced the topic of protective factors and what they are, is to make this point that when there are certain individual strengths that are protective factors, I would say really all of our individual strengths serve in some way as protective factors. The ones I want to highlight in particular, though, are self-esteem, coping skills, and self-efficacy, right? So these individual strengths in particular serve as protective factors by promoting the development of resilience. And I'm going to talk about kind of how they interact and how this works to support resilience. But as you can imagine, self-esteem can help to support the use of coping skills, and there are several different types that we're going to talk about in just a moment: emotion focused, problem focused, meaning focused, and social focused coping skills. And that helps to contribute to a sense of self-efficacy. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Self-esteem, right? Anytime I see or put the quote, "I love myself," I don't know about you, but I immediately think of Kendrick Lamar's song, "I Love Myself," right? That sense of confidence and being of worth or value as an individual, right? Self-esteem is something that is so important. I think all of us, if we had to name some of the top things that we want our children to have and to carry with them, self-esteem is probably right up there at almost the very top of the list, right? Because from self-esteem comes so much else when it comes to their life and how they go about life. So let me just pause here. I want to ask you, as parents, as caregivers, as adults, what helps boost your self-esteem? And if you don't mind taking a moment and just sharing that in the chat. And as you're thinking about that, also, if you can let us know, what things do you do to boost your child's self-esteem? So again, yeah, what are some things that you personally do that boost your self-esteem, or are there people that have helped you to boost your self-esteem? All right, I see giving them positive feedback. Absolutely. Um, if you can maybe reflect on for yourself, are there people who poured into you as a child, as a young adult, or even now as an adult that have helped to boost your self-esteem? I'm seeing here also words of affirmation, having a hype song, having them create a brag list. All right. These are great thoughts so far. And if there are others, please don't hesitate to share. But I really want you to kind of think about again what self-esteem means to you and how you boost it in yourself and what things you're doing already to boost your child's self-esteem. All right, let's talk about coping skills. And the connection that I want you to see here is that when we feel good about ourselves, when we believe in ourselves and have a sense of worth and value, we are much more likely to use healthy coping skills or healthy ways of coping with stressors that we experience, right? So when we think about coping skills, we could break them down into several types. There are emotion focused coping skills that help to alleviate the emotional distress we're feeling. Problem focused coping skills are skills that help to address the problem that's causing the stress that may be then contributing to the emotional distress that we're feeling. Meaning focused coping skills are strategies that help us to make sense of the situation that we are experiencing. And social focused coping skills are when we use strategies to reduce our stress by seeking support from our community. So we'll talk a little bit more specifically about these. If anyone has questions or anything else, like I said, don't hesitate to put it in the chat, and certainly we'll have our time at the end. But if you have any questions or want me to pause at any point as we're going along, don't hesitate. Emotion focused coping skills, as I said, are skills that help to alleviate the emotional distress that one is feeling. So, for example, I may be feeling sad or overwhelmed or anxious, right? And an emotion focused coping skill might be using mindfulness to bring myself back into the present moment, using breathing exercises, talking with a therapist, to help me process those emotions. Um, we have therapy listed here, and I think that it's a great emotion focused coping skill. But I also think it's important when we think about our young people that we want them to really build up their toolkit of coping skills that they can use on their own in the moment, no matter where they are. Therapy can be a great way of learning emotion focused coping skills. But it's also important to recognize that we all need those things that we can do in the moment when we are feeling overwhelmed or sad or anxious or just feeling distressed by our emotions. The point that I want to make here is that when we are intentional in regulating our thoughts and feelings, we can exert agency over our internal world, even if the external situation stays the same. So, for those of you who were on the with us last night, there was a slide that I showed that listed all the different stressors that are currently going on, and you know I could only fit so many on a slide, but there is war, genocide, family separation, job loss. There are lots of things going on right now, right? A lot of racial trauma and other things that many people are experiencing. There's a lot in our present society, perhaps in our families as well, in our communities, that we can't change, or we can only do so much to change as individuals. So it's really important that we as adults teach our kids that even when we can't exert agency over the external situation, at least not right away, that we can control how we respond and feel inside. Um, Problem-focused coping skills. So problem-focused coping skills are skills that help to address the problem that's causing the stress. So for example, maybe my young person is feeling overwhelmed because they've got a test coming up and they've got a paper due and they're just feeling really stressed out. They don't know where to start. It's making them feel anxious and overwhelmed. A problem-focused coping skills would include things like um, writing a to-do list, brainstorming a list of solutions, seeking out resources to help solve the issue. I'll give a perfect example. My oldest daughter, who just started college, has her first big assignment due, and so she was feeling overwhelmed. She talked to us about it. She is using resources by reaching out to us and asking for information and help. And she said, I'm realizing I'm going to have to not go to the practice that I wanted to go to tonight so that I can work on my project. So managing time management, organizing your priorities. I wonder how many of you are aware of the priority matrix. Is that something you can maybe just say yes or no in the chat? The priority matrix is like this little diagram, 4 squares, and things are marked urgent, not urgent, important, not important. If you're not aware of that, I would really highly recommend looking it up and using it for yourself, but also sharing it with your young people, because when you're feeling overwhelmed with a long to-do list, um, that priority matrix can often be helpful to kind of sort through and identify what are the priorities, the top things I need to get done, and what things maybe I could at least put till a little bit later. Managing expectations is also another problem-focused coping skill. All right, meaning-focused coping skills. These are strategies that we use to help us make sense of the situation that we're experiencing. And I'm sure that we've all experienced this before, right? This is when we reframe a challenge into something positive, right? So maybe my child is taking AP US history and it's a hard class and they are struggling in it, but they say to themselves, well, this is hard, but by going through this now, it's going to help me be prepared for college and what I have to do in college. Many of us, for those of us for whom faith or spirituality is important, um, that is often a primary source of meaning and meaning making when it comes to experiencing challenges and reframing them. Placing the experience into perspective, believing that the experience can help you build strength and resilience. Meditation and prayer, practicing gratitude, journaling. I want to just pause here and ask, what type of meaning focused coping do you personally use? Can you give me an example? Or maybe when was the last time that you found yourself reframing something, saying this was a challenge, but it's going to work out in the end, or this is helping me in some way? Or maybe your child. Would love to hear if you've got some examples of that. Okay, I love that 80-20 rule when prioritizing. Um, Love that. I see reframing the challenge. Faith practices. Yeah. Depending on your faith perspective, if your scripture oftentimes will speak about the good that is going to come from a challenge, or how you're being led to your higher purpose through the challenges that you've experienced. So, that's really good to hear that you have some strategies already. How often are you having conversations with your kids around using this, or to what extent do you think you are intentional when it comes to really trying to instill this in your kids? And I'm going to go on to the next slide, but maybe if you're thinking about that and want to share with us, what's the level of intentionality that you find yourself as a parent using when it comes to instilling this? Great. I'm seeing here, practicing gratitude gives a different perspective, allows one to see opportunities. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that seeing the additional opportunities when we shift our perspective. So that's great. Um, just to talk a little bit more, I'm going to highlight faith and spirituality as protective factors because again, for many of us, that is something that is very important and core and something that we find ourselves using, particularly in times of stress and uncertainty and when there are, maybe societal factors and things going on that we have very limited control over. This is an example I want to also just kind of highlight here how we've got this individual level and then the relational and the communal level, as I mentioned before, that our protective factors are on different domains. On an individual level, protective factors with regard to spirituality and faith. Um, Spirituality and faith can serve as an important source of positive beliefs about yourself, right? If your faith tells you that God loves you and you have worth because you are a child of God, that can contribute greatly to the development of a healthy sense of self-esteem. It can help you make meaning out of adversity if you believe that ultimately things are going to work out for your good. It can facilitate optimism and hope. On a relational level, when you are, and this is talking about like one-to-one relationships with others, when you are relating with others with whom you share faith or spiritual beliefs, it can foster deeper, more meaningful connections and understanding and commitment in those relationships. And oftentimes people will, speak of or feel that they have a personal relationship with God or a higher power of the universe, however they define that. So there's a very personal aspect there. And then finally, communal level, coming together as a community can produce fellowship and unity, a sense of belonging and acceptance, all of which help with that ultimately mental health and well-being. And then collective efficacy. So I'm going to talk about self-efficacy here in a second. Collective efficacy is that sense that we can together, we can overcome, we can overcome oppression, we can make positive change in our community. And if there's a divine sense of purpose behind us, that can be very inspiring and helpful. So in terms of some strategies that parents and caregivers can use to support our young people through faith and spirituality, I think one of the biggest ones is modeling for our young people. So if prayer, meditation, or other spiritual practices are important to you, allow your children to see you engaging in that, or that you are carving out space for it. Discussing your faith and values and belief systems on a regular basis is also really important, particularly when it comes to challenging societal situations and issues that are coming up. That may be a great opportunity to bring in how your faith and your values as a family play a role. Actively engaging in a faith or spiritual community as a family and having getting your kids input in what they like about that or what things they want to do. And then seeking opportunities for your young person to put their faith in action and really actively, intentionally drawing connections between your faith and resilience, purpose and empowerment in the face of adversity on both a personal and societal level. All right. I'm going to just look at the chat real quick and see if there's any questions that have come up so far. I see here a comment, understanding that there is something greater in store that aligns with your purpose. Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so important and so key, and something that can really help people get through tremendous difficulties and hardships. And it all feeds back, like I said before, it feeds back into that sense of self-esteem. Talk about self-efficacy here in a second. If you believe that you have a purpose and that everything is kind of lining up and aligned in that way, that just helps to serve as positive reinforcement. And I see here a rejection or something not working out or going our way is usually a redirection to something more aligned for us. So great comments. All right, social focused coping skills. These are skills that we are using when we use strategies to reduce our stress by seeking support from our community. This can include spending time with loved ones and friends. Volunteering, I think, is a huge one. As a psychiatrist in my practice, I work with a lot of patients who are struggling, who've been through some really tough times, traumatic events, or maybe experiencing depression. And I find often that those who engage in volunteering or serving others, even as they are going through their own challenges and stressors, it really helps to enhance their sense of self. It can facilitate gratitude, um, facilitate community, connect them to a sense of purpose, and so on. Participating in civic activities and community advocacy also is something that's really important. And again, when there are lots of things going on in society that you as an individual, as a parent, and your kids and your family members may be frustrated by, encouraging participation in civic activities and community advocacy as a way of addressing the stress that we feel and working towards being the change that we want to see, right? Processing experiences with others. So these are some examples of social focused coping skills. So when we have self-esteem, when we believe that we have worth and value, we're more likely to engage in positive ways of coping. Now, we have to see positive ways of coping modeled for us. And so that's, again, why having these conversations with parents and caregivers is so important. But when we use positive coping skills to address an obstacle that we may encounter, that leads us to successfully overcoming that obstacle. When we may not come out with, totally unscathed. We may have some cuts and bruises along the way, but that sense that I've done it, I overcame, I came through it, leads to a belief that I am capable of success, right? And so when I believe that I am capable of success, that's again self-efficacy. That increases my self-esteem, which increases the likelihood that I'm going to use positive coping, which then further reinforces my self-efficacy. So self-esteem, coping skills, and self-efficacy create a positive feedback loop. Um, and I see here resetting the algorithm on their social media platforms. Yes, that I'm so glad that you brought that up, and we'll come to that in I think when we get to our Q&A. I would love for us to talk about that more. Another Steve Fund colleague and I were just talking the other day about I think she put it this way: it's like empowering your algorithm. So recognizing that your algorithms are going to give you, and sometimes it's not even intentional, right? You clicked on a video or something, and now it's feeding this material to you. And if it's negative, it's just going to keep giving you this negative material. So being intentional in empowering your algorithm so that it's giving you positive things and cleaning that timeline, I think is really a great point. Would love for us to talk about that a little bit more when we get to the Q&A section. Thank you for bringing that up. Some strategies and activities to enhance individual strengths and resilience. Want to spend just a little bit of time talking about that before we prepare to wrap up and open up for discussion. Some examples, and I think this is one of the most important ones, is creating your own personal safe space. And that's a safe space both literally or physically and emotionally. Naming your emotions, it can sound very simple, but actually it's really important. Identifying the connections between your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, journaling, engaging in mindfulness and grounding exercises, having a list of mental health and crisis resources and other supports, and taking a strengths inventory. If there are others that you can think of, please share. Again, none of these are meant to be exhaustive lists. These are just examples. Let's talk a little bit about what a safe space looks like. So if you have a safe space, please share that with us. That's actually on this next slide that I'm going to come to. But a safe space is something that we all need. And again, I think of it as being a physical space and an emotional space. So a physical space could be a room in your house. It could be a corner of a room. It could be a corner of a closet. It could be a bench in the park. It's wherever you feel that you have a sense of peace, a place where you can just be and express or sit with your emotions, whether they are good or not so great feeling emotions, where you can really be comfortable to be yourself. For most people, that's at home, but for others, it may be, outside or elsewhere. So I would love for you to share do you have a safe space? And then we're going to talk about what an emotional safe space looks like. Um, in terms of the physical safe space, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. This is actually a picture of my youngest daughter's cozy corner that she created when they were in preschool. I think a lot of preschools have like a cozy corner. It's like a little book area, book nook. And so she took that idea of a cozy corner and she created one in her room. She got some little starlights that she ordered and a beanbag chair. And this is where she likes to sit and de-stress and read. Um, and my oldest daughter has a similar space, and I have a similar space. Um, it's something that I was intentionally trying to model for them, and so without me even telling them to create this space themselves, I noticed like, oh, you've got this little space. So, yeah, what is your space? I see here Monica says my garden. Um, do any of you have a space that you have carved out for yourself in your home, in your room, your car, or outdoors? Is it something that you feel like you need, or um, something that your kids have done? When it comes to creating that physical safe space, these are just some suggestions for what it might look like if it's in your house. Might be having a pillow, a comfy place to sit, a throw blanket. If you journal, might be the place where you journal. Having scripture that's important to you, affirmations, um, a vision board. I'm really big on making vision boards. And if you have not done one of those before, don't know what it is, would highly recommend it. A vision board is where um, you could take quotes and pictures and images and kind of create a collage of whatever the vision is for yourself, right? And it helps you to, when you look at it, to remind you of what it is that you are aspiring to for yourself, whether that's from a spiritual standpoint, a physical health standpoint, or relational, or whatever. So a vision board could be a good thing to put in your safe space. Um, Scented candles or incense, photos of your family, whatever it is that helps you to feel safe, to feel comfortable, and to feel like you can truly be yourself, right? I'm seeing here, this makes me realize that I need to do this for myself, creating a physical safe space. Yeah. I it's not something that I always had done for myself. I got the idea actually from someone else and realized like, gosh, I really need this. And I think especially as parents and caregivers, we can be so busy caring for our children, our families, that we can lose sight of that need to have that little space for ourselves. Now, we've talked about a physical space, right? But having an emotional safe space is just as important, possibly even more important, because your emotional safe space can be portable. It can go with you wherever you go, because it is something that's in here. It doesn't depend on you being in a particular physical space. Now, certainly being in a physical space can help facilitate you getting into that mode, but an emotional safe space is a place that you can go in your mind where you have a feeling of relaxation, a feeling of being mellow, calm, um, whatever words come to mind for you. And as I'm saying this, even if there are words that come to mind for you that you would use to describe that emotional safe space for yourself, I would love to hear it. Um, I have a young lady that I'm seeing in my practice, a college student, who shared with me the other day that she had been very anxious and now she's feeling more mellow. And I asked her to describe to me what that felt like and what mental picture came to her mind. And she said, it's like I'm at the pool and I'm floating like on a raft or an inner tube, and the water is just I'm just floating along with the water, and the sun is beaming down on my face. And I told her, I was like, oh, that's such a wonderful example, because she's got a mental image. She's got like what her body feels like when she's relaxed, right? Um, I share as my own personal example, I love to go to the beach. And I made this practice a few years ago that I also love jazz. I love Miles Davis and John Coltrane. And so I started listening, excuse me, to um, some of those songs when I would be at the beach and sitting at the water or riding a bike, because I realized that if I do that, it's going to create this connection in my mind that when I hear that music, it helps me to connect with the feelings that I have when I am sitting on the beach feeling relaxed, right? So I'm giving those examples to you as, not to say that that's what would be your emotional safe space, but I really do want you to think about, especially, the like the comment was made already, you may be realizing like I need some of this for myself. What would be some of the components for you? Some other things, affirmations, music. Now, you may have your phone with you and you can turn on music, but it may be a song that you just hum in your head, maybe a prayer that you recite, maybe some breath work, some breathing, some mindfulness. Give some thought to what that emotional safe space looks like for you. And I would really encourage you, if you have not created that for yourself before, to do that. And then to also get that physical space, and then sit with your young person and encourage them to do the same if they have not already done that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go through these last few slides, and then we'll have some time to have some discussion. Um, when it comes to other strategies that we need in order to be able to be resilient and to help our young people, it's being aware of our emotions. So you may have seen this emotion wheel. Oftentimes in therapists' offices, they may have a pillow cover that has this picture or a picture like it or a poster. Basically, the idea of being able to identify our emotions and to go beyond just I'm mad or I'm sad. I'm feeling joy. I'm feeling serenity. Maybe I'm feeling apprehensive, or I'm feeling a sense of boredom. When we name or are able to name our emotions, that also helps us to recognize that we have the agency to change them, to do things that they may not go away completely, but we can shift how we feel. And using strategies like we've listed here, um, for managing painful emotions is really important, and very important not only for us but also for our young people, in again helping to reinforce that reality that they do have agency. um, Recognizing our strengths and assets, doing a strengths inventory, is also really important, and I've listed here some different strengths. And I'd love for you to take a moment and just quickly put in the chat, are there some strengths that you recognize within yourself? um, are there some that you see in your child? And then how about in your family as a unit? So, I would say determination is one of my most important strengths, or I'm a very goal oriented person. I persevere. That's one of the things that's most important to me, right? So, whatever those things are for you, the VIA Character Strength Survey is a great resource. If you Google it or go to the link, it's a free online survey that can identify not only the ones I've listed here, but other strengths and assets that you have. So, really important in building self esteem. It is actually a self esteem building exercise to just look at and name your strengths. And this is another really good thing that you can do with your young people. And then also highlighting within them the strengths that you see in them. So, like, this was a really busy day that we had, or this is a busy weekend. We've had to make some changes. This is you talking to your young person. We've had to make some changes. We had to adjust our schedule. I really appreciate your flexibility in going with the flow. That's something I really appreciate about you, and that's going to serve you well as you get older. Or, I love how motivated you've been in pursuing your basketball or extracurricular activity or academics, right? Um, a few more things here. Excuse me, I'm just going to get some tea. Some ways that we can strengthen our young people, or help to support our young people by strengthening their self agency, are to encourage voice and choice. We can do this in simple, everyday ways, right? And starting from very young ages. Let them take part in choosing family activities, meals, weekend plans. This helps them to recognize that what they want, and their voice, that they can help to contribute to an outcome that helps to build, again, self-esteem and self-efficacy that they can use as they get older. When it comes to their school involvement, ask for their input on their study routines. How do they think that they should be going about doing things? There may be certain extracurriculars that you really want them to participate in, but as much as possible, try to take their personal goals and interests in mind. And encourage them, because they're more likely to engage in and be dedicated to things that they have interest in, right? Support them in setting goals for academics, friendships, and hobbies. Modeling modeling assertive communication is another really important one. So asking for help is something that is so important, but can be very challenging to do. So it can be helpful for us as parents and caregivers to model for them. Um, I need help with this, or, I feel uncomfortable when I have to X, Y, or Z. That helps them to internalize that it's okay to need help. It's okay to feel uncomfortable sometimes. And there are things that you can do about that. Role playing. I'm curious how many of you do role play with your kids, maybe with a pretend school or peer scenario. That can be a great way to engage them and to help equip them. Celebrating their input and effort with positive reinforcement. I gave an example a moment ago about, saying, oh, I love how flexible you were with going with the flow when we had to change our schedule up, right? Acknowledge when they make thoughtful choices or express themselves. Another thing would be really curious about, if you want to share, are there some traditions that you have, or recognition rituals that you engage in as a family or as a parent when it comes to celebrating your child and letting them know not just about the big things, but the little things that they do that make a difference. And then teaching reflective decision making. I'm a big stickler with pros and cons list. If there's a problem, let's make a pros and cons list and help them explore the outcomes of those different choices. Encourage them to take small risks and point out to them, like, I want you to do this because it's going to help build your resilience, and resilience is going to serve you well in the future. We want them to know how to seek help. It's important that we know as well. So wanted to share just some brief information with you about some resources if you feel that it would be helpful or beneficial for you or your child to engage in counseling or therapy. School counseling resources are available. You can schedule with a therapist directly, engage with your insurance company to get information. The 988 crisis, suicide and crisis lifeline, is a 24/7 support that is there and available. We also have a 24/7 crisis text line through the Steve Fund for students and adults, and that is available 365 days a year as well. And just pointing out that having these resources is an example of problem-focused coping. All right, I wanted to also share, and we may be able to put a copy of this in the chat as well, or you may want to do a screenshot of it. I'm recognizing that at this particular time, having access to therapy is, for many people, becoming even more challenging than it already was previously because of insurance or insurance loss, job loss. There are some really important free and low cost therapy resources available that you should be aware of if you are wanting to engage in therapy and are concerned that it is not accessible because of cost or insurance. And then at the Steve Fund, our family support initiative, Family Corner, we have been launching new material. We have digital toolkits, resources. We have a monthly newsletter. If you go online to our website, you can sign up to receive that newsletter on a monthly basis. And as I mentioned, we're going to be continuing to share webinars and other resources and journals. Also, for your young people, we have a resource called My Digital Sanctuary. We have videos, journals, articles, guides, and more, and it's just for them. We have links here in the chat that you can click on that'll take you there. I shared this already with our crisis text line information. And then just wanted to leave a final quote that perhaps the greatest challenge in times of uncertainty is feeling a loss of control, which can lead to feelings of helplessness and hopelessness. But the antidote to helplessness and hopelessness is empowerment. To be empowered means to recognize that you have agency and to use that agency in ways that are meaningful. So I want to open up now. We have still some time left for questions. I'm going to show you we have a survey that we will share the link for here in just a moment. Um, if you have questions, have comments, um, really curious your thoughts about just resilience and protective factors and all of those things. Would love to get your thoughts. And if you want to come off of mute, you can raise your hand and be happy to hear your voices too.